everyone. Welcome back to the Always Closing podcast. We are here in Whittier with our very special guest, Mike Medina.
Hi.
Hi, Mike. Okay, so Mike, to kind of start us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm a real estate broker. I've been in the business going on 18 years.
Okay.
I hold a real estate broker's license, a mortgage license. We also do an in-house escrow. And just overall, been in the business 18 years. We've been able to experience, all the different cycles that we've had.
Yeah.
And obviously right now we're experiencing a new cycle, so
right.
Times are changing.
Yeah. So I know, a few years back, I think it was in 2008, 2009, the market was also, down. Mm-hmm. How can you compare the one a few years ago and then the one that we're going to now?
So I think for that, right now we're barely starting. If there's going to be another correction or crash,
okay,
I think we're barely starting that. It's kind of going to be hard to tell whether it's going to go through or not. What I could tell you is that on the last one, there was a lot of factors that made the crash, inevitable to happen, right? So,
yeah.
like for example, there was a lot of people who were upside down in values. There were a lot of terrible loans out there.
Right.
So it just got to the point where people just said, well, enough's enough, and they gave up on their home. Mm-hmm. Today we're seeing something different. Today we're seeing that there is, obviously there's something going on with the economy.
Right.
But the majority of the people have fixed products on their loans.
Right.
Right. And on top of that, they have very, very low interest rates. So mm-hmm. I don't see a lot of people giving up their homes the way they did, prior to the last crash.
Okay.
I think this time is going to be a little different. I think people are going to fight for their homes. I think some people are going to say, you know what, if I do lose my house, I'm going to have to go pay rent. And rent right now is just terrible.
Yeah, so, yeah, it is.
Yeah, so definitely. Yeah, that's going to be one of the things I think that's going to be one of the biggest things right now. I think people are going to hold on to their house because they have very good rates, very good loans.
Yeah. Okay. So then I know you were talking about how you've been into, the business within 18 years. How did you get into it?
So I got into the business. I was buying my second house, right? Mm-hmm. And I was buying here in the city of Whittier. And during the process, I was going over to the real estate agent's office. And while I was there, the broker was hosting real estate courses and classes.
Oh, nice.
So he asked me if I wanted to participate in the classes. Mm-hmm. And then I figured, well, why not? If I'm going to be buying real estate, mm-hmm. my overall intention, even before I got into real estate, was to buy real estate.
Okay.
So when the broker offered that, and it was locally, I said, well, why not? Let me try it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, about 6 months later, I got a license and I started doing real estate. So I was able to get into the business from originally planning to buy properties to deciding to become a realtor and buy my own properties.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you always kind of know that you wanted to be in the real estate industry, or is it something that kind of happened as you got older?
I think I wanted to be in real estate in the form of being a landlord.
Okay.
So when I was growing up, my dad had a few properties, a few rentals, right? Mm-hmm. And as soon as I could drive, I was in charge of picking up his rents.
Okay.
I was also in charge of sending out his mortgage payment. Mm. So every month I would see the amount that would go out on a mortgage and the amount he was collecting in rents.
Okay.
And I quickly realized, I said, wait a minute, the difference it's pretty good, right?
Right.
Like the actual cash flow that he was making was pretty good. Mm-hmm. And then I compared that to what was the typical wage at the time.
Yeah.
And I said, wait a minute, with one or two properties, you can kind of offset, living expenses.
Right.
So I knew from the beginning that I was going to get into real estate. I knew I wanted to be a landlord. But at the time, the job that I had, mm-hmm. I quickly realized it wasn't going to be enough for me to scale up. Mm-hmm. And that's why when I was buying my house and I met the broker, he offered the classes and I decided to jump in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, when you say the job that you had before you got into real estate, mm-hmm. what were you doing before?
So I was working at a school.
Okay.
Yeah, I was working at a school. I used to teach it. It was an adult school for people that got hurt on the job.
Oh, okay.
And I was teaching very basic computing.
Okay.
Word, Excel, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that some of the people who were, injured at work and they wanted to go back to work, mm-hmm. they could either select a different type of career. So at the time I was teaching computers.
Okay.
Computing, yeah.
So now that you're in the real estate industry and you have all this experience and you've gone through challenging obstacles, what would you say is the hardest part of being in the industry?
Well, I would say that after 18 years, one of the biggest challenges that you have is, I guess it's adapting to the actual changes that come, right?
Yeah.
So when I first started real estate, I started in 2005, I think 2005. So with that, I quickly experienced the crash like a year and a half later.
Okay.
When I first got into the business, I was 100% sales. That's all I knew. All I knew how to do was sell. And when the market crashed, there were no more sales.
Okay.
So my income went from very high to very little, almost nothing, right? And I think it was the same for a lot of realtors during that time.
Yeah.
So at that point, what I realized is that you need to be able to diversify where your income comes from, right? So at that point, I realized that it couldn't be strictly sales. It had to be from other avenues. And there's just so many things to do in real estate. You know, there's sales, there's investments, there's developments, and just the overall umbrella of real estate. There's just so much to do.
Yeah.
So I quickly realized that I was only focused on one thing, and when that one thing crashed, there was no more business for me.
Yeah. So, I know you talked about the challenges and you always have to change. I know you talked about that. So in the market, in the real estate industry, where it's constant change all the time, how do you adapt to change? How are you constantly, adapting to the different ways that the market is always, changing?
So what you have to do there, at least some of the things that I do is I look at my client base, right?
Okay.
I look at my client base, and when I started, 18 years ago, technology was very limited.
Yeah.
So back in the days, it was more of meeting your clients, more of a physical connection, right?
Right.
You would actually go to their house in the afternoons, and you would talk to them about buying a house. You would pre-qualifying them at their house. I used to even go meet them for lunch at their work,
Yeah.
So even like the minimal things, it was more of a physical, where now it's more of a digital. Everything's online, or you do it through a cell phone, and you do it through through text and stuff like that. So to a certain degree, there's something that gets lost there.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges right now that realtors or anybody in the industry needs to be able to adapt to.
Yeah.
I've even had clients now that I guess my old ways of saying, hey, you want to come to the office or I can meet you? And they're like, no, just shoot me a text or I'll email it to you.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build a connection with them, because I understand that to a certain point, that works, right? But if you're able to build a very strong connection with your clients, and if you're able to see how your clients are adapting, then that's going to be a very good indicator of how you should also be able to adapt, right?
Right.
So if you see clients that are wanting to use technology-based tools, then you need to adapt to those type of tools, right? And you always need to be looking ahead to see what other technology tools you can use before your client recommends them to you. You need to be able to recommend them to them.
Yeah.
So things like that, yeah.
So I just, now that I'm still learning within the real estate industry, I have also learned that connections and relationships with your clients is, really important. If you have a great connection with your client, that's also, a door open for them to give you referrals. So,
correct.
So I know you mentioned the technology. So what do you think, what's the new technology or some technology that's now affecting the real estate?
So I would say that there's a lot of technology that's affecting the industry in the way that it's taking jobs away from people in the industry. So even though there was a lot of new realtors that came into the business these last 2 years during COVID, the real estate industry was booming, and the real estate business became a very hot job. A lot of people wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And it's very seasonal. I mean, when business is booming, people are in.
Of course.
And when it's not, people are out. And even when they're in, I mean, the success rate of real estate is very, very low.
Of course,
I think only one in 2 in 10 people make it in the course of 5 years. So it's very, very difficult. So I think moving forward, I think realtors need to be able to work on their people skills. They need to work on their client skills.
Okay.
And then I also need to know, I think they also need to know, and they need to fully understand the business that they're in.
Okay.
Because now we're competing with, corporations that own technology, right?
Yes.
We're competing with these bigger companies that are telling the sellers, hey, I could sell your house for a lower compensation. You don't have to deal with no one. You just will send you everything via email and it's done, right? So when the real estate market is hot, you have a lot of realtors that get into the business. They really don't know a whole lot because things sell themselves, right?
Right.
There's just so much business to go around for everybody that eventually they do find some business. But eventually down the line, when things get tight, and there are in this case clients that are looking for someone to service them in regards to business.
Yeah.
I think that's where the skills are going to kick in.
Okay.
So if your skills, if you're on top of your skills, if you're on top of the business that you're in, then when you actually go talk to a client, it's the information is going to pass through.
Right.
Right. And I think at that point, when sellers or even buyers interview realtors, I think that's where the information is going to be very important versus someone who maybe was just going to go out there and try to wing it type of stuff and say, hey, you know what, I was able to get listings in the past or buyers in the past because there was just so much business. But as the business shrinks, the competition for the industry is going to be two things. One of them is going to be other realtors who are maybe working on their skills, and number two is going to be the technology.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that being said, as you were upcoming as a real estate agent and even now, how do you continue to stay motivated? With us at the time that we are right now on the market, it could be, challenging to stay positive and, stay upright. So how do you maintain positivity and how do you maintain being, motivated?
All right. So for that, I think with me, it's always been, my why.
Okay.
I think everyone needs to have a why, right? For why you do business. Why are you working in real estate? And, at the end of the day, we all understand that we have living expenses, right?
Right.
Some of us have expenses that extend to a family, right? Either you have a spouse or you have kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think everyone has a why. And at the bare minimum, that why should be your motivation, right?
Right.
So right now that the market is getting tight, I think a lot of people are starting to look back and saying, well, you know what? I'm having a hard time maybe producing income.
Yeah.
And then at that point, your why needs to maybe change a little bit. You need to be able to see, the entire picture of what it is that you want to do and what it is that you're going to do moving forward, right?
Yeah.
So I think for that, the way to stay motivated is to always, take a second look, take another look at exactly what's going on in your business now.
Yeah.
And how you can improve it.
Of
right?
course.
Because the reality is that why is always going to be there. And in some cases, that why might not be necessarily useful at the time. I know sometimes some people, in times of slowdown and stuff like that, they'll create different whys, right?
Right.
And they'll say, hey, I'm going to do this because of these reasons. So for something like that, I think it's very good for someone if they're looking for motivation, if they're looking for a different avenue of being able to approach this. I think for that they should rediscover their why, and if need be, add different things to it.
Yeah.
Right. And then every day that'll motivate you to maybe want to do things a little bit different.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, kind of going further into the conversation with the market, how do you maintain your business and your clients?
So I've always believed in client first.
Okay.
That's always been my thing. Client first, right? So I'm always going to do what's best for the client, never what's best for me or the industry, right? So with that, what I mean is that it's very, very hard to keep clients, right? And we all understand that it's very hard to find clients, first of all.
Yeah.
It's very hard to find clients. And then on top of that, once you do find clients, they're getting information from everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If it's not someone, cold calling their house, if it's not someone door knocking them, if it's not even friends and family that become realtors in the industry, stuff like that.
Right.
So there's always a lot of competition, right? But the way I've always retained my client is I'm circling back to the same thing. It's always been client first. So by that, what I mean is if I ever see an opportunity for them to be able to, save some money, or if I could save them money through either closing costs or some type of way, or even through the rates, through the interest rates, when it comes down to actually sitting them down and explaining the type of rate they're going to get and stuff like that, I think it's best that the client sees the overall picture versus just giving them a rate and a payment, right? If you're able to sit your client down and explain to them, and again, this comes back to the whole understanding your business, right?
Of course.
So if you understand your business, then you're going to understand how the mortgage industry works. You're going to understand how the fixed products work. And then you're also going to know where any flaws in a mortgage would be at, right? So say, for example, your adjustable rates or your negative amortization rates and stuff like that. So if you could properly understand that, and if you could express that to your clients, and they're able to see that hey, this person has their best interest for me.
Yeah.
Then at that point, it's very hard to lose that client, and in return, they're referring you a ton of business. Yeah.
I like that you said that you have your clients first, because that should be everyone's priority as a realtor. Whatever you do in any kind of business, that should be your main goal. So, as a real estate broker, for buyers and sellers, what can you give them on advice, how they know that their realtor is really genuinely helping them and they're not trying to, they don't have bad intentions?
So for something like that, I've always thought that communication is key, right? So say, for example, if you're working with a realtor and then that realtor, they go over to their house or whatever the situation is, right? They were able to get the listing, or they were able to get them as a buyer. And then shortly after, they pass them on to someone else. Whether it's someone on their team or it's maybe an assistant or someone else. And then the client at that point feels discounted. They feel like, hey, so what happened to this realtor that gave me all these promises, and all of a sudden I haven't heard from this person. Yeah, they're gone. So they're at a home inspection, right? And they have questions, and they're asking the assistant or somebody else, and that person's saying, hey, I don't know, I just came to open the door, sorry.
Yeah.
Right? Or they're trying to go over disclosures and stuff like that, and they're calling the realtor, and he or she might pick up the phone, and they seem rushed.
Okay.
They seem, as if they have many things to do, right? So, from a client's perspective, I think that if you're doing right by your client, I think communication is very important. And I think from the beginning, it's very important to sit down and find out exactly what their expectations are, right? So if you're sitting down in a transaction, the seller says, hey, this is what I'm planning on doing, this is what I want to do, then you kind of want to stick to those expectations as much as you can.
Yeah.
Try not to change them, because at that point your client might say, hey, you know what, going into the transaction, this is kind of what I was expecting, but I got something completely different from you. And I think at that point is where a lot of realtors drop the ball and they'll lose clients.
Yeah.
So if you're a buyer or a seller, I think communication is very key. If you're communicating with your real estate professional, I think that's very important. If you feel that they're answering your questions, that they're helping you out with, say, for example, disclosures, inspections, and stuff like that. If they're able to, not necessarily from a compensation standpoint, because I understand that competition is tough right now, and a lot of people are discounting, their commissions and stuff like that. But I think overall, buyers and sellers would appreciate better service over discounted service any day.
Oh, of course.
So for that, I think it's very important. Again, sit down and go over the expectations. And then as a realtor too, you should have expectations for your clients. It shouldn't only be clients and sellers versus the realtors. I've had clients where their expectations are just to the point where I feel like I can't meet them. Right, so at that point, I tell myself, just like a client would tell us, hey, I'm sorry, I'm going to go with someone else.
Yeah.
I've been in situations where I feel like, hey, this client, like their expectations, I feel like I can't meet them, and if I do take on this transaction, it's going to be very complicated and very stressful. So at that point, I'll elect not to take the transaction.
Okay, and will you let them know at that point, like, hey, this is a situation, I'm going to refer you to someone else, or do you let them know as to why you won't be taking them on? Yeah.
I mean, I've actually, if I ever feel that a client's coming on too strong, or their expectations are too high, and it's always going to be that way. I mean, there's times where a seller knows. Sometimes the sellers know more than we do what their house is worth, because sometimes they might have had 3 or 4 sales on the same street. So by the time we show up, we're taking our comps. The seller already has an idea, but the seller bumps up the price, right? If the property's worth 600, they want 650 for it.
Yeah.
And they're saying, well, I'll give you the listing if you can give me 650, but guarantee me 650. And then while we're in the process of 650, I want things to go this exact same route, right? So at that point, if the expectations are too high and I feel that I can't sell that property for that price, I'll suggest multiple things from, starting a tier of listing, maybe setting the listing a little bit higher, and then if it doesn't sell, every 2 weeks or so, start lowering it. But I've had clients where I actually tell them like, hey, I'm sorry, but I understand where we're at, but it seems like we're not connecting, and I don't think I'll be able to take your listing. I'm sorry, but I won't be able to take their listing. I've had clients actually tell me, well, wait a minute, why not?
Yeah.
Right? So at that point, I'll tell them, look, I want to make sure that I service your property. I want to make sure that it gets sold.
Yeah.
And I feel that at the price point expectation that you have, or if it's not the price point, sometimes it's limited to showings. Sometimes some sellers say, I'm only going to show the house, on Saturdays from this time to this time, and I want you here every Saturday.
Yeah.
And physically, if you cannot commit to that, then that's one of the things that you could have a drawback and say, you know what, I can't meet that expectation, right? I've had sellers tell me, I need you here with every showing. And I said, well, there's going to be maybe 5 or 10 showings per day. He said, well, I need you here. And then I did the math and said, well, I'm probably going to be at this property about 50 times. And on top of that, other little things that contributed to me deciding not to take that listing, right? But again, it comes back to communication. If you're honest with the client, I think they would appreciate that. The actual clients that I told them that I wouldn't be able to take them, some of them, we renegotiated on the table, and I was able to take the listing or take the. But some of them that I didn't, they actually appreciated the fact that I was honest with them. Yeah. Yeah.
So most of the time you get good feedback. It's like, thank you so much for being honest, and then you guys go your separate ways.
Yeah, that's kind of the way it is. And what a lot of people in the industry need to understand is that sometimes sellers or buyers are not interviewing real estate professionals based off of their skills. They're not interviewing them based off their skills or based off of their experience or how good they were in the interview. Sometimes buyers and sellers have their own game plan, and they're looking for someone to bring along in that game plan.
I see.
Right? So say, for example, I've had sellers that I've gone to the property, and obviously there's something wrong with the property. You could tell when you go in, like there's issues, physical issues with the house, right?
Yeah.
And I tell them, okay, well, upon taking the listing, we're gonna have to do disclosures, and I'm gonna have to fill out my buyer's, visual inspection. And they're like, oh, wait a minute. And so like little things like that. Sometimes I've experienced sellers that are looking for maybe not an experienced realtor, because again, they wanna bring them along for their ride. Right. So for that, you always gotta be very careful how you address that. And getting back to the point, circling back to the point that I was talking about, is that it works both ways. Just the same way that a buyer or seller would interview, a realtor for a job, the realtor or the real estate professional always has to mirror that back and look to see if they want to take on that client for a transaction. Yeah.
Okay. So when you do these expectations and these interviews and these meetings with potential sellers or buyers, have you ever dealt with, I'm sure you have, so how do you deal with a difficult client? Not a difficult listing, perhaps, but the seller, the buyer themselves are difficult.
All right, so from time to time, it happens, and sometimes you go take the listing, or you start working with a buyer, and you see a certain side of them, and you feel, hey, I can work with this person, right?
Yeah.
Halfway through the transaction, their other side comes out, right?
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, they're either frustrated, or something is going on that's triggering them that cause that change, right? So the way I deal with that, it's going to come back to what we talked about earlier, is setting expectations. Okay. If you tell a buyer or seller, what is it that I can help you with? What is it exactly that you need, right? And for that is more, it has to be an actual conversation. It can't be done, via email or via text. There has to be some form of conversation, either physical or an online, like a live call, right? because there's certain things get lost in text messages, certain things get lost in emails in regards to, it's real value, right? What it is you're trying to express. So every time I'm going to take on a new client, I always make sure that I set the expectations, and I always talk to them on the phone.
Okay.
And I tell them, this is exactly what you want. We go over a checklist, I write it down, so that if the transaction ever gets complicated, like you said, then at that point I could talk to the client and I could say, well, I'm meeting your expectations. Everything that it is that you wanted, we are doing.
Yeah.
So what is it that's causing this, right? So depending on what it is, sometimes some clients you can give them everything that they want for, and when they figure that you did, they want more. And that kind of changes things, right? So for things like that, I would just try to listen to the client. I would try to talk to them. I would make sure that I'm meeting their expectations.
Okay.
And if halfway through the point they have additional expectations or their expectations changed, then we'll have another sit down.
Okay.
Another sit down, we'll talk about that, we'll find out exactly what's causing, the stress.
Yeah.
What's causing the stress, what's going on. If it's within my control, I'll gladly help them out. If it's not, if it's expectations that they're setting on their own, expectations that I cannot meet and the transaction cannot meet. Let me give you an example of that. Sometimes going into a purchase, you have buyers that the properties are being sold as is, right? And you explain to your clients, you say, hey, look, property is being sold as is, and then the agreement, the contract states that it's being sold as is, right? You have the right to do an inspection. If there's any, health and safety concerns, the seller may consider those type of things. But don't come back with a long list of actual repairs and upgrades that you want, right? So I've dealt with clients that come back and say, well, I'll buy the house if they change out the whole roofing system, or I want a brand new air conditioner.
Yeah.
I've had clients say, I don't like the kitchen. And they give me a brand new kitchen. So what they're doing there is that at first they agreed to purchase a property as is, and they knew that they had the right to inspect. They may call out some minor cosmetic stuff, right?
But not a whole new kitchen.
Not a whole new kitchen, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, things come up. If they're major things, you can cancel. But sometimes some clients, their wish list is pretty rough, and then they set a brand new expectation for them, right? And they're saying, well, if I can't get this done, then I'm gonna cancel the transaction. And they're creating their own little drama.
Yeah.
In their head, they created their own little drama, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you as realtors, you have to absorb that kind of stuff.
Of course.
And then you have to say, okay, how am I gonna deal with this now? And then you're trying to figure out exactly how to work it, right?
Yeah.
So my approach is very simple. If I'm meeting your expectations, then I'm gonna let you know exactly what time it is, right? I'm gonna let you know, hey, you know what, this is what you agreed to, and this is where we're at right now. The seller's not gonna agree to that. If you choose not to move forward, now's your time to cancel.
Yeah.
If they do cancel and the client was complicated, they cancel the transaction, I'm done in regards to assisting, right, upon the cancellation, and I'm out.
Okay.
I'll tell the client respectfully, you know what, on your next purchase, I can't help you.
Okay.
Yeah. Because for that, I kind of value my time, and I want to make sure that, that just as people request respect, I also want to make sure that they respect us as real estate professionals.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we're talking about buyers and sellers, I wanted to ask you, what are some simple mistakes that realtors can make to lose buyers or sellers?
So for something like that, I think sometimes being overconfident.
Okay.
It's very, very good to have confidence, and I've always felt that confidence comes from knowledge, right? Say, for example, if you understand your business, and I'm going to circle back to that by understanding the business. I think I might have mentioned that 2 or 3 times without actually explaining it, right? So by understanding your business, you have to be able to carry a conversation with a client.
Right.
If a client sits down and says, hey, I'm interested in real estate, and then the conversation goes from properties to pricing in a specific area, to the interest rates, to the, hey, what would my payment be on something like that, right? You should be able to answer those questions on the spot. You should be able to do it from your head, and you shouldn't have to call anybody. You shouldn't have to check your phone or check an app or any of that stuff, because if you understand your business, then your conversation is going to flow. And what real estate professionals are looking for is, and especially clients, what they're looking for is that specific flow.
Yeah.
Right? Whenever you're selling something, you need to be able to sell, and there shouldn't be any gaps or pauses. If a client tells you, hey, I'm interested in this or that, and you have to, oh, wait a minute, I got to call somebody, and I got to call and find out what's going on with the rate or what would the payment be for this, and that creates gaps.
Yeah.
And if there's gaps, and that flow is gone, right? So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you understand your business, that you're able to carry on a real estate conversation. And I think that that's a very, very good way of retaining your client, right? But sometimes when you're overconfident and you go over to the house and you make it seem as if either selling their house or working with them with buyers is not that important to you. You're constantly on your phone. They're asking you questions, and the answers are very short, as if you kind of have other things to do.
Yeah.
So sometimes buyers and sellers will say, "Hey, wait a minute, I'm selling, a very important asset that I own, which is my house. I lived here for a long time." Or buyers are saying, "Hey, I'm very interested in buying this house. I'm going to live here for a long time, so I kind of need you, the professional, to help me, right?" Versus helping with distractions and stuff like that. So I think real estate professionals, realtors, should pay attention to the details.
Okay.
If you don't pay attention to the details, if you don't have a very good conversation with the client, then you really won't know exactly what they want.
Right.
You won't be able to meet their expectations, right? So for that, I would say, being overconfident, thinking that you know the job and that you're going to get the results done without taking the proper steps of conversating with your client, I think it's a big mistake.
Yeah, without being prepared and knowing what you're talking about.
Correct. I mean, not knowing what you're talking about, or maybe just being overconfident in the form that you feel like, hey, I'm going to get this done, but yet you're not explaining anything to your client along the way.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes clients want to say, for example, the realtor's going to say, oh, I'm going to counter this, or I'm going to do this and that. And the buyer or the seller is saying, well, why are you doing that? Can you keep me in the loop? I want to know why. What's the strategy behind that, so I can understand that. And some realtors will say, oh, don't worry about it. I'm on it. I got it. I'm very good at what I do. And at the end, you end up with a confused client. Right. And confusion in real estate is very bad. Confusion always leads to cancellations. So you need to make sure that that you're confident. You want to make sure your client feels confident with the information that you're providing. Because if they're confused, believe me, that's going to lead to cancellation. Yeah.
So when you mean by communicating, you don't only mean by communication with, the escrow or the lender or your seller. You're talking about actual explanation to your seller or buyer. This is a document. This is why we're doing it. This is why it's important to the transaction. Do you have any questions? That's a little bit more what you're saying, right? That to genuinely explain every single step in the process of buying or selling a house.
Correct. So what you want to do from day one, if you're working, depending on who you're working with, right, a buyer or seller, every transaction has what I call a networking team, right? So say, for example, if you're the realtor and you go into a transaction, it's also going to involve an escrow company. Yeah. It's going to involve a title company. It's going to involve an appraiser, a home inspector, an insurance agent, right? And it should involve, depending on the transaction, it should also involve a CPA, and it should also involve a real estate attorney, right? Yeah. The biggest mistake that realtors make is that, again, overconfidence. They feel that they know it all. And sometimes buyers or sellers are asking financial questions or legal questions, and here's the realtor trying to respond, right? Yeah. And they shouldn't respond. Because realtors, licensed realtors are licensed to sell homes. They're not licensed for financial or legal advice, right? Legal advice, yeah. So for stuff like that, I would say it's very important to let the client know, hey, from the beginning, I'm your real estate agent. I'm gonna kind of quarterback this whole thing. I might not have all the answers because I don't know this property. Yeah. Right. I know the business. I just don't know this property. So we're going to rely on a team, a networking team that's going to involve, like I said earlier, the inspectors, the escrow companies, right? And based off of their feedbacks, I'm going to gather the information, and you and I are going to go over it, right? Any information that we may have, I might relay that back to the networking partners, right? So if a client of mine has an escrow related question, I try not to answer it. Okay. I could answer it the very basics, right? But if they're trying to get into fine paperwork and stuff like that, I would say, you know what, maybe it's best if you call the escrow company.
Yeah.
Or say, hey, something's going on with the preliminary title report. You know, I understand how it works, and I could pinpoint some of the flaws that might be in it. But again, if they're looking for specific advice on it, I might tell them, you know what, let's talk to the title rep, because that's a team member, right? I shouldn't try to wear all the hats, knowing that we have other networking partners that could help us for something like that. So in a situation like that, I would say, it's always very important that from the beginning, you let your client know that there are other people that can assist in the transaction, and you don't necessarily have to do everything for them, right? Some clients are seasoned and they'll come in and they'll have very limited questions, and some are brand new and some are going to have a ton of questions.
Right.
But again, if you're in a position where you have to answer these questions, you should seek the right people that are within your network of partners for that transaction.
Okay. So I was very curious to know, from your perspective, you've been in this industry for a very long time. There was one point where door knocking was really popular. In today's world, with all the technology and everything's changing, do you believe that door knocking is still useful?
So I think door knocking today is still useful. It's got to be done with strategy, though.
Okay.
If your strategy is to go cold knock somebody, just randomly start knocking on people's houses, that's not going to work.
Okay.
A, you're wasting your time, and B, people don't know you.
Yeah.
They don't know if you're a realtor or not. They're scared.
Right.
Pandemic hit, there's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of people don't open doors anymore.
Yeah.
So I think if you're going to door knock, I think you should consider farming an area.
Okay.
So if you farm a specific area and you with time you start passing out handouts or flyers or mailers, and people start identifying your name and your face, I think the day that you actually knock on that door and they see you, they're going to say, hey, wait a minute.
You're like, oh, you're that guy.
You're that guy.
Yeah.
I've seen you before, right?
Yeah.
So it gives you a small little window to be able to have a small conversation on there, right? Versus just door knocking and stuff like that. And then additionally, if you are going to door knock, you need to be able to have some type of valuable information for the homeowner. If you're door knocking, just saying, "Hey, my name is such and such, and I'm a realtor, and I'm the best, I'm good, whatever the situation is," that's of no value to the homeowner. They're like literally waiting to close the door on you, right?
Yeah.
But if you door knock the house or the property after farming the area, after creating some type of marketing exposure for yourself, for your name, right? And then if you door knock the home, that's considered more of a warm lock, right? A warm knock in this case. And then on top of that, if you have something of value to give them, like say for example, you could say, hey, there's been 3 recent comps that have sold on the same street. If you can find something within a street or two, that's where people are interested in. And you just simply hand it out to them. And you say, hey, this is the information on recent sales, and then maybe you can get into your pitch, right? If you're able to set up some type of technology base, say for example, if you link up with your title company, your title company might give you access to be able to review property profiles online, right? So if you door knock, and if you take maybe a tablet, and if you're able to maybe convince a homeowner to leave the door open long enough, right? So at that point you can get into, hey, you know what, there's been recent comps. In fact, if you would like, I could check the value of your home right here, right now. So on your tablet, on your property profile, you could punch in the address, and the technology today is so advanced. You punch in the address and all the information is there. Everything, right? So all of a sudden you're sparking interest. The homeowner's like, oh, that looks pretty good. Yeah, exactly. So at that point, what would happen is say, hey, I could email this to you right now. So in a matter of a warm door knock through farming an area, you were able to knock on a house. They opened the door because they recognized you, right? You became a small little celebrity, I guess, within the city, within the town there. But then at that point, if you could offer them something of value, and if you could offer them maybe a report on their house and email it to them on the spot, that makes a big difference.
Okay. So if a realtor or real estate agent does want to door knock, you recommend warming the area, passing out your flyers, your cards, the situation, and then approach the property.
Yeah, you want to warm up the area through farming. and you want to have something of value when you're doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So as we're wrapping up, I always like to ask everyone that is on the podcast if they have any tips or advice for any struggling agents or any upcoming agents wanting to be in the real estate industry. So what, knowledgeable as you are, what kind of advice or tips can you give everyone?
So for something like that, I would say that just remember that real estate is seasonal. Right? Real estate is seasonal. And just like every year there's seasons, just like you have a coat that you don't wear during the summer, real estate is the same. The only thing is that it doesn't work on a yearly basis. The seasons come on a basis of possibly a decade, right? So there's times where real estate sales are hot, right? People are buying, and as a real estate agent, you're busy. You feel you're on top of the world. You feel that you don't need to adapt yourself. You feel that you don't need to improve yourself because the cash, because the cash is coming in.
Yeah.
Cash is coming in, right? So, and then yet there's a slowdown, and then you were you narrowed your skills down to one specific thing, and then all of a sudden that's not available anymore, right? So, after the last real estate crash, I quickly realized that if I was only going to do sales, then my business was seasonal. Yeah. And it was going to dry. If I'm going based off, say, for seasons based off of a decade, where sometimes real estate is very busy, sometimes mortgages, the loan business is very business, which is why I decided to get a mortgage license, right? Sometimes the mortgage business is very busy, and then you adapt. Yeah. You go from doing real estate to doing mortgages, right? Within those transactions, as a real estate agent, you should also be looking for opportunities for yourself. For investment properties, you should be looking for rentals. You should be looking for possible flips or possible developments, right? Yeah. Because that additional income is the income that helps you during slow times, right? So my biggest advice would be is just for people who are struggling right now is to don't be afraid to reinvent yourself. Okay. Especially right now, there's nothing wrong with going back and hitting the books. Yeah. Nothing back with, going back and taking some courses, networking with people, finding out what's working for other realtors and stuff like that. And if there is a slowdown, sometimes what happens is that as much as you try, there's just no business. As much as you try, there's just, I'm not going to say no business. There's just not the business that you're accustomed to or were accustomed to during a boom, right? So sometimes some people say, hey, I'm going to do things differently and I'm going to bring that business back. And sometimes it's, we're going through like a real estate winter. That business is not there. Yeah. So you need to be able to adapt yourself to multiple things. If you could find yourself into the rental properties, if you can get yourself into development properties, right? While that cycle comes back. If not, then you're going to be waiting on the sidelines for months, if not years. Yeah. And by that, not necessarily 100% on the sidelines, but business will dry. So you're going to be active, but you're going to find yourself having very little business because you're relying on something that just simply is not there. The market took that away, right? Took the buyers away, or took the sellers away, or just took the overall sales away. It was nothing necessarily that you did or could have done. It's just the current market that we're in. Yeah. So my last question that I, really wanted to ask you now that you bring up that you're a broker and a mortgage broker. Yeah. I know that you are also a real estate, developer. Your office is beautiful. It's here in Whittier and it's recently new. Yeah. What steps did you make or have to take to build your own building from scratch? All right. So I when I first became a broker, I was renting an office. Okay. Right. I was renting an office, and then the landlord kept raising the rents. And at the time, I had already been flipping houses. I had been flipping houses. I have some information based off of that. Some construction knowledge and stuff like that. So what I told myself, and I said, wouldn't it be cool if I could build my own place? Yeah. And if I could build multiple suites, if I could, move into one and rent the others, right? Yeah. And kind of pay myself rent if I'm going to continue to do this long term. Long term. So I started looking around. I started looking for actual structures to buy that were already office use. And I ran into this property here that was a smaller office space, and I decided to buy it. When I finally decided to jump in, during my inspection periods, I went to the city to find out how big I can build it, right? Because the office space that was here was small. So I hired an architect, and we started going over planning, and it turned out that I could almost triple the space that was here.
Wow.
And I decided to do that. So during that process, I ended up, the original structure that was there, I kind of brought that down, and I kind of only kept the one wall to help me out with my setbacks and stuff like that. But I ended up building the entire building. I'd say about 99% of it is brand new.
Yeah.
So now we're able to keep our overhead down. So in times like this, in times that are slow, it's it's okay. I don't have to worry about a whole lot of overhead, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have to worry about rent and stuff like that. You're able to get through these winters that we call.
Right.
So with slowdowns and with different cycles in real estate, there's always opportunities. You just gotta, again, I'm gonna circle back to I think one of the first questions that you asked. You need to find out what's your why.
Yeah.
Right? You need to find out what's your why, and why do you do things? Why do you wake up in the morning? What's a problem that you have that you can fix, right? What's something that's needed? And at the time, I just told myself, you know what? I'm going to be a broker. I'm going to have my own office, and I shouldn't be at the mercy of maybe a landlord deciding, what's going to happen there, right?
Right.
So I just decided to jump into it and build my own
Very
building.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, your building is absolutely beautiful. I mean, we came in here and it was, it looks brand new, looks very modernized, just very put together. So I wanted to thank you, Mike, for being on our show and, giving us your knowledge. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, or, where people can find you and get your contact information?
Yeah, so you could find me on social media. Okay. I'm actually right now, I'm building my social media. I guess I'm a little late to it.
Yeah.
when I first started real estate, we're still using fax machines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I kind of missed that boat, I guess you could say, right? From some of the realtors that came in maybe even 3, 4, 5 years after I did.
Yeah.
But I'm starting off with my social media. I'm going to be building a YouTube channel.
Okay.
And you could find me under Mike Medina Real Estate.
Okay.
Everything that you need is Mike Medina Real Estate, from my YouTube channel to my Instagram to TikTok, all across the board.
Wonderful.
Type in Mike Medina Real Estate and I'll be there.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And can we also find that, if someone's trying to look up at your website and see everything that you do, can we also find you under Mike Medina Real Estate?
Yeah.
Okay.
So everything you would find under Mike Medina Real Estate, including the website. That's just MikeMedinaRealEstate.com.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Trying to keep it very simple here.
Yeah. Mike Medina Real Estate, guys. That's it.
Mike Medina Real Estate. Oh, and if I can give any advice to anybody, if you're looking to brand yourself, try to brand yourself with your name. You might work for a company today, but you might not work there tomorrow.
Yeah.
So if you're a real estate professional looking to stay in this business for a while, always brand your name.
Okay.
Always brand your name and make sure that you give that name a value, so that as business grows, people are going to identify your business by your name.
Right.
Most people that know me, just Mike Medina Real Estate. It's just for everything. I keep it very simple. If they try to find me online, they're going to find me under there. And at the same time, I'm branding myself. Right.
Yeah.
It makes it very easy to continue with the marketing stuff like that. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for your knowledge and, talking to us and being on the show. That wraps up today's episode, guys. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.